Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to talk about Italian loanwords in Libyan Arabic. البالو, البالوات, the street pole, and this comes from palo. Marciapiedi, the sidewalk, and this comes from marciapiede. Simaforo, simafruat, the traffic light, and this comes from semaforo. Salita, the ascent or the slope, and this comes from salita. Flangoli, around the corner, and this is actually a phrase. L'angoli means corner, and this comes from l'angolo. Giardina, the garden, and this comes from giardina. Il parcheggio, the parking lot, and this comes from parcheggio. الكاسة, الكاسات, the cashier, and this comes from cassa. البورصة, البورصات, the bag, especially a plastic bag or a bag from carton, and this comes from borsa. Lista, listat, the list, and this comes from lista. Spesa, spesat, the errands or the grocery, and this comes from spesa. البشكليطة, البشاكليط, the bicycle, and this comes from bicicletta. الكنشيلو, الكنشيلوات, the gate, especially an iron gate like in the picture, and this comes from cancello. الكوجينة, the kitchen, and this comes from cucina in Italian. Notice how we say cucina, but in Italian it's cucina. Rifugio, the basement, and this comes from rifugio in Italian. المانيليا, المانيليات, the door handle, and this comes from maniglia. Retti, the mosquito window net, like in the picture, and this comes from rete, which simply means in Italian just net. طاولة, طاولات, the table, and this comes from tavolo in Italian. Forchetta, forchettat, the fork, and this comes from forchetta. Lavandino, lavandinuat, in Italian it's lavandino. Il bagno, البانيوات, the bathtub, and this comes from bagno. المولة, المولات, the spring, and this comes from molla. البالة, البالات, this can mean the shovel but also the dustpan, and this comes from pala in Italian. Sacco, saccuat, the travel bag, and this comes from sacco. المالية, الماليات, a t-shirt, and this comes from maglia. Tuta, tutat, the tracksuit, and this comes from tuta. الكناتيرا, الكناتيرات, the undershirt, and this comes from canottiera. المطاندي, المطانديات, the underpants, and this comes from mutande. Giacca, giaccat, the jacket, and this comes from giacca. Gibbotto, gibbottuat, or gibotti, gibbottuat, and this means the coat, and it comes from giubbotto. Guanti, guantiat, the gloves, and this comes from guanti. الجونة, الجونات, the skirt, and this comes from gonna. Sharba, sharbat. This is a type of headscarf like in the picture, and this comes from sharpa. Lavaggio, the car wash, and this comes from lavaggio. الجومة, الجومات, the tire, and this comes from gomma. Cofino, the truck or the boot of a car, and this comes from cofano. البراوانتي, the bumper of a car, and this comes from paraurti. البطارية, البطاريات, the battery, and this comes from batteria. طانطا, طانطات, the truck, and this comes from the Italian word ottanta, which is actually this is a type of trucks made in Italia, which is like a brand of car or a model, and it was named ottanta, which actually means 80 in Italian, but in Libya it became known just as any truck. الماكينة, الماكينات, the machine, comes from macchina. Massa, the electric mass, and this comes from massa in Italian. Il calcio, calciuat, the kick, and this comes from calcio in Italian, which means a lot of things, including soccer or football, but in Libyan it just means kick, calcio. Testa, the headbutt, and it comes from testa in Italian, which just means head. Miseria, the poverty or misery, and this comes from miseria. Trucco, truccuat, the tricks or acts of deceit, and this comes from trucco in Italian. Scoglio, this means rocks which you find in the beach like in the picture, and this comes from scoglio in Italian. Il fondo, the depth, especially when